Temple Grandin, A Story of the Mind Unleashed. Chapter 1. The Woman Who Thinks in Pictures. I think in pictures. Words are like a second language to me. Temple Grandin. From the bustling suburbs of Boston to the vast cattle ranches of America's Midwest, from the quiet halls of academic research to the loud voices of civil rights for those who cannot speak, Temple Grandin's story unfolds like a living mosaic. Hers is not a tale of ordinary progress. It is the story of a mind uniquely wired, not broken. Misunderstood by society but deeply connected to animals, Temple turned her neurological difference autism into a source of groundbreaking insight and innovation. In a world that often viewed autistic minds as incomplete, Temple Grandin declared hers to be simply different, a mind rich in color, motion, emotion, and logic. Diagnosed with autism in the 1952nd, when most doctors believed the condition to be a life sentence of institutionalization, she went on to change two entire worlds: how humans treat animals and how they understand people with autism. To grasp the true brilliance of Temple Grandin, one must begin by seeing as she sees, not in paragraphs or sentences, but in vivid three-dimensional images that flash across her mind like scenes in a movie. To her, thoughts are not spoken, they are drawn. This way of thinking allowed her to understand how cattle perceive the world. It enabled her to spot every shadow, every reflection, every sound that might frighten an animal. And through this understanding, she redefined the ethics and design of livestock handling systems around the world. But her impact doesn't end in the cattle chute or in scientific journals. As a writer, professor, and autism advocate, Temple Grandin has given voice to the voiceless. Through best-selling books like Thinking in Pictures and The Autistic Brain, and through worldwide lectures, she has lifted the veil of silence surrounding autism. Her journey is far from easy. It includes ridicule, rejection, loneliness, and a continuous battle against social misunderstanding. But it also features fierce intellect, scientific precision, unyielding curiosity, and a mission grounded in compassion. Temple Grandin has shown the world that being different doesn't mean being less. This script is not just the biography of a scientist, it is the portrait of a revolution in perception, a testimony to what can happen when society learns to listen to every kind of mind. Chapter 2. Childhood in Boston, A Quiet Mind in a Loud World. Temple Grandin was born on the 29th of August, 1947, in Boston, Massachusetts, into a family of intellect, creativity, and complexity. Her full name, Mary Temple Grandin, carries with it a long-standing family tradition, but it would soon become synonymous with revolutionizing two entirely different worlds. From the moment she entered the world, Temple was not quite like other children. Her mother, Eustacia Cutler, described her as different from the start. She was a beautiful baby, with big, expressive eyes, always observing, always watching, but rarely responding in ways other infants typically did. She didn't like to be cuddled. Loud noises made her scream. She didn't speak until nearly the age of 4. Her world was full of colors and textures, shadows and movement, but largely devoid of social signals and spoken words. In the 1952nd, autism was a little-known and poorly understood condition. When Temple failed to develop speech at the expected time, her mother consulted pediatricians, child psychologists, and educators. The diagnosis came: brain damage, some said. Others labeled her with childhood schizophrenia. But one term began to circulate more definitively: autism. At the time, most children with autism were institutionalized, removed from society, and assumed to be incapable of learning or productive lives. The prevailing theory, known as the refrigerator mother hypothesis, wrongly blamed cold and distant parenting, especially from mothers for autism. This cruel myth only added pressure to Temple's already complex upbringing. But Eustacia Cutler was not the kind of mother who gave up. Refusing to accept the grim future painted by doctors, she sought alternative ways to reach her daughter. She enrolled Temple in speech therapy, employed a speech pathologist, and surrounded her with structured routines and patient caregivers. Slowly but surely, Temple began to speak. It wasn't just the sound of her voice returning, it was a door opening into a mind unlike any other. The power of a visual world. Even before Temple could fully articulate her thoughts, it was clear that she perceived the world differently. Where most children responded to tone, affection, or social cues, Temple responded to visuals vivid, intricate, immersive. She saw patterns, shadows, and geometry in everyday things. This wasn't just imagination, it was visual thinking, something Temple would later define as her core mode of cognition. "I see the world in pictures," she would later write. "To me, words are like a second language." This gift, however, made childhood difficult. School was a war zone. Temple was bullied, teased, and often misunderstood by classmates who saw her behavior as weird or robotic. Her inability to conform to social expectations such as maintaining eye contact, understanding sarcasm, or participating in small talk made her an easy target. She preferred machines to people, animals to classmates, and silence to noise. But amid the chaos of social misunderstanding, Temple began developing obsessive interests, another hallmark of autism. She became intensely focused on mechanical devices, sliding doors, spinning objects, and later, livestock gates. She was endlessly curious, often disassembling objects to see how they worked. While most children played house or hopscotch, Temple wanted to understand the logic behind motion, pressure, and design. Her interests weren't idle. They were the seedlings of an engineering mind, a mother's fight for education. Eustacia Cutler understood her daughter's unique intelligence and fought relentlessly to secure her a proper education. Temple's first school experiences were turbulent. Traditional classrooms didn't suit her, and her disruptive behavior often led to punishment or expulsion. Eventually, Temple was sent to Hampshire Country School, a boarding school for gifted but challenging students. It was here, amid quiet forests and hands-on learning, that Temple began to thrive. She was mentored by Dr. Carlock, a science teacher who became one of the most influential figures in her life. He saw not a troubled student, but a genius in the making. He encouraged her to channel her interests into experiments, problem-solving, and invention. Most importantly, he believed in her something that had been in short supply. Under Carlock's guidance, Temple built her first hug machine, a self-designed pressure device that mimicked the calming sensation of being embraced without the overwhelming sensory input of human contact. Inspired by cattle squeeze chutes used to calm livestock, her invention helped her cope with anxiety and panic attacks. It would later become a widely studied therapeutic tool in autism research. Adolescent years, pain, isolation, and resilience. Teenage years were particularly difficult. Temple often felt like a foreigner in her own species. Social norms remained elusive. Romantic relationships, fashion, popularity, none of these interested her. What did interest her were patterns, systems, cause and effect, animal behavior, and mechanical design. She often felt isolated and depressed, not because she disliked herself, but because the world around her refused to understand her differences. But with her mother's unshakable support, a few rare mentors, and her own relentless mind, she kept going. Temple's teenage journals reveal a mixture of rage, logic, creativity, and longing. She wrote detailed plans for mechanical inventions, designed imaginary systems for animal handling, and questioned why people acted irrationally. The margins were filled with doodles not of faces or flowers, but of gears, corridors, curved walls, and animal mazes. By the time she was ready to enter college, Temple Grandin had already overcome more social and cognitive barriers than most people face in a lifetime. Chapter 3: Discovering the Animal Mind, College, Livestock, and Scientific Rebirth. The journey to adulthood was anything but typical for Temple Grandin, yet despite the struggles of adolescence, her unique mind began to find its proper place in the world, not in crowded classrooms or bustling social events, but in open fields, cattle yards, and laboratories. It was in understanding animals that Temple found her voice, and in livestock science that she found her mission. College life, a new frontier. Temple's early experiences in college were, at first, discouraging. She enrolled at Franklin Pierce College in New Hampshire, where her behavior still seemed unusual to peers and professors alike. She spoke bluntly, avoided eye contact, and had difficulty with abstract ideas, but in concrete thinking and systems analysis she excelled. Temple majored in psychology, a field that allowed her to explore behavior both human and animal. Although the world of academia demanded heavy use of verbal and abstract reasoning, Temple's ability to visualize data and behavioral systems made her stand out. She would later say that psychology gave her a framework for understanding how others thought, even if she couldn't fully feel what they felt. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology in 1970, a remarkable achievement, considering the bleak prognosis given to her as a child. But it was during her summers on a cattle ranch in Arizona, visiting her aunt and uncle, that her future began to crystallize. Animals, chutes, and patterns of fear. It was at the ranch in Arizona where Temple first came into intimate contact with cattle. She observed their behavior with a quiet intensity. Unlike humans, animals didn't expect small talk or emotional reciprocity. They communicated through movement, sound, and fear. Temple could understand that. More than just observing, she empathized with livestock, not in a sentimental way, but in a deeply cognitive, sensory-based way. She recognized how cattle reacted to shadows, sudden noises, small changes in lighting, and unfamiliar people. Her mind, always attuned to visual cues and sensory overload, found a mirror in the behavior of animals. While other ranchers focused on brute control or tradition, Temple began asking deeper questions. Why do cattle balk at entering certain areas? Why do they resist narrow chutes or squeeze cages? What do they see that humans don't? She realized that animals were not being stubborn. They were responding to stimuli that humans had overlooked. A dangling chain, a high-pitched whistle, a shiny puddle of water. These were often the culprits behind chaos in the stockyard. Temple began documenting her observations in drawings and diagrams. She imagined new systems, curved paths instead of sharp turns, solid walls instead of slats, non-slip floors, and chutes that worked with the animal's instincts rather than against them. Her visual brain became her most powerful tool. Temple's passion for livestock behavior led her to pursue a master's degree in animal science at Arizona State University. There, she encountered resistance from peers and professors. The agricultural world was, and still is, male-dominated and resistant to outsiders, especially one who behaved unconventionally and questioned long-held practices. Yet Temple persisted. Her master's thesis focused on the behavioral reactions of cattle to various physical and environmental conditions in slaughterhouses. She applied rigorous data collection and analysis to confirm what she had long suspected. Most cattle agitation and injury during slaughter were preventable, not inevitable. Temple's early designs for livestock handling facilities revolutionized the industry. She introduced non-slip flooring, curved alleyways, anti-slip entrance ramps, and quiet handling techniques. Her systems drastically reduced animal stress and injury, improving both animal welfare and meat quality. She was quickly becoming the leading expert in a field that barely existed before her arrival. Temple's unique cognitive profile, particularly her visual thinking, allowed her to simulate systems in her head, often without needing physical models or computer software. "I can run a piece of equipment in my mind like a virtual reality simulator," she explained. "It's as if I walk through it, see how animals respond, and find the flaws before it's even built." This rare ability gave her a distinct edge over traditional engineers, especially in areas that required a deep understanding of animal perception. Most livestock engineers saw the world through blueprints and calculations. Temple saw it through the eyes of the animal. She didn't simply design machines. She designed experiences, paying attention to how every corner, slope, texture, and shadow might affect a frightened or curious cow. This integration of animal psychology with engineering design was revolutionary. It transformed Temple from a curiosity to a consultant, sought after by slaughterhouses, universities, ranchers, and government agencies. Temple Grandin earned her Ph.D. in animal science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 1989. Her doctoral work further deepened her understanding of animal stress, vocalization, and environmental response. More importantly, her academic credentials solidified her status in a skeptical scientific world. She was no longer the weird girl with the cattle drawings. She was now Dr. Temple Grandin, an expert whose insights saved companies money, improved animal welfare, and satisfied increasing consumer demand for ethical treatment. By the early 1992, Temple Grandin's designs were being implemented in slaughterhouses across North America. Her systems now handle over half of all cattle processed in the United States. In 1997, she published the first edition of Livestock, Handling, and Transport, now considered the gold standard in the field. Her facility audits, design protocols, and behavior checklists became industry staples, improving not just humane treatment, but also efficiency, safety, and meat quality. She also helped major corporations like McDonald's, Cargill, Tyson, and Wendy's develop more humane slaughter protocols. Her inspection systems gave companies measurable standards, helping them meet both regulatory guidelines and public ethical scrutiny. Through her work, Temple Grandin made one thing crystal clear: treating animals with respect and care is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Despite her academic and professional success, Temple often struggled in social settings. She found small talk exhausting, sarcasm confusing, and workplace politics frustrating. Meetings could overwhelm her. Phone calls often made her anxious. To cope, she developed rigid routines, note cards, and scripts for public interaction. She relied on logic over emotion in workplace conflicts and continued to experience sensory overload from noise, touch, and visual clutter. But through it all, Temple persevered not in spite of her autism, but because of it. Her ability to remain hyper-focused, to analyze systems without bias, and to see details others missed all stemmed from her unique neurological wiring. Her professional life was not a retreat from her challenges. It was a deliberate, thoughtful engineering of her environment to make space for her gifts. Chapter 4: The Hug Machine, Sensory Worlds, and the Science of Comfort. Temple Grandin's journey was never simply about academic accolades or engineering excellence. At its core, her life's work has always stemmed from a profound desire to understand discomfort and to transform it into peace, clarity, and functionality. One of her earliest and most personal innovations emerged not from a laboratory or classroom, but from the deeply felt chaos within her own nervous system. Birth of the squeeze machine. As a child, Temple often experienced episodes of overwhelming anxiety and sensory overload. Certain sounds like a fire alarm, a vacuum, or even crowded voices could cause her to scream or collapse into panic. Light touch, such as someone brushing her shoulder, felt unbearable. yet she craved the grounding sensation of deep pressure. She noticed something curious while observing cattle in a squeeze chute, a device used to hold animals in place during vaccinations. The moment pressure was applied, the cow would stop struggling and seem to relax. She saw this not as restraint, but comfort. That observation sparked the idea for a device that would change her life. At just 18 years old, Temple began designing what she called the squeeze machine, later known in psychological literature as the hug box. The device consisted of two padded boards connected by air-powered compressors. When Temple lay between the boards, she could control the amount and duration of pressure applied to her body. Unlike the chaos of human touch, the squeeze machine delivered predictable, gentle, evenly distributed compression, which brought her a calming sense of focus and safety. The first time she used it, she described it as a hug without the chaos. The science behind deep pressure. Temple's personal experience would later be validated by science. Deep pressure stimulation has been found to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's rest and relaxation mode, reducing cortisol, stress hormone, and promoting serotonin release, the mood-stabilizing hormone. Her squeeze machine not only calmed her, but allowed her to self-regulate emotions, focus better on schoolwork, and sleep more soundly. It became her sanctuary. In time, Temple introduced the machine to occupational therapists, autism researchers, and special education professionals. Clinical studies followed, exploring the use of deep pressure therapy for autistic children, ADHD, sensory integration disorders, and anxiety disorders. Despite early skepticism, the hug machine gradually earned recognition as a viable therapeutic tool, a testament to Temple's belief that autistic insight was not a liability but a scientific asset. Living in a sensory world. Temple often described her mind as like Google Images. When she thought of a word, she didn't hear definitions, she saw a stream of pictures. For example, when someone said the word church, she didn't conceptualize the idea of religion or community. Instead, she instantly visualized every church she had ever seen from Boston to Boulder. Her mind was like a mental Rolodex of images, meticulously indexed and retrievable by visual cue. She could rotate objects in 3D, simulate motion, and test mechanical functions all in her imagination. But this immense visual processing power came at a cost. In unfamiliar environments or crowded spaces, Temple became overwhelmed by visual noise, blinking lights, clashing colors, motion patterns, reflective surfaces. Auditory overload was just as debilitating. Sudden sounds, even clapping, sneezing, or humming, could disrupt her focus and spark panic. Many of her behavioral quirks, her need for routine, repetitive movement, blunt communication, were simply strategies for surviving a world built for neurotypicals. Temple would later write, "Half the time, I wasn't being rude. I was just trying not to scream from the noise in the room." In her 1995 memoir, Thinking in Pictures, Temple laid bare her internal world, the vivid imagery, logical reasoning, social confusion, and emotional regulation that shaped her life. The book became a landmark in autism literature, praised for offering a first-person view into an autistic mind without romanticizing or pitying it. She explained in plain language how she compensated for social limitations using logical decision trees. If someone cries to check if they're hurt or sad, to offer comfort, even if I don't fully feel what they feel. If someone greets me, say hello, smile, ask one safe question, how are you? Or how was your weekend? These behavioral scripts didn't make her fake, they made her functional. She argued that autism didn't need to be cured, only understood and accommodated. In Temple's view, autism wasn't a deficit, it was a different operating system. Temple's experiences with the hug machine inspired her to design the world in ways that worked better for everyone, neurotypical or not. She advocated for quiet rooms in public schools for overstimulated students, predictable routines for children with anxiety, visual instructions in classrooms, workplaces, and airports, low stimulus lighting in public spaces, more hands-on learning, less theoretical abstraction. She partnered with engineers and designers to create inclusive spaces that reduced sensory triggers and supported diverse learning styles. Temple didn't ask the world to change for her. She simply pointed out that when it did, everyone benefited. The Grandin philosophy, science rooted in empathy. By the 2002, Temple's influence expanded far beyond livestock. Her work became central to the neurodiversity movement, which argued that neurological differences like autism, ADHD, and dyslexia were not flaws, but natural variations of the human genome. She became a sought-after speaker, consultant, and educator, addressing audiences that range from meatpacking CEOs to autistic teens, from elementary school teachers to UN policymakers. Her message remained consistent. The world needs all kinds of minds. Temple emphasized that visual thinkers, pattern thinkers, verbal thinkers, and auditory learners each offered unique insights. She pushed for apprenticeships, vocational training, and skills-based learning, which allowed students who struggled with traditional academics to shine in hands-on environments. Innovation through emotionally neutral logic. One of the most profound aspects of Temple's personality is her emotional neutrality. Unlike most people, she processes empathy logically, not emotionally. She doesn't feel what others feel, but she understands behavior, consequences, and compassion through observation and pattern analysis. For example, she doesn't tear up when a cow is injured, but she is deeply troubled if the system allowed suffering to happen. Her empathy is structural. She prevents suffering by fixing flawed environments. This style of engineered empathy challenges traditional ideas of compassion. It shows that emotion isn't the only path to kindness. Logic, precision, and design can be equally humane. Temple Grandin's innovation in animal science, her contributions to autism advocacy, and her trailblazing life story have earned her widespread recognition. Named in Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People in the World, 2010, subject of the HBO biopic Temple Grandin, 2010, starring Claire Danes. Recipient of numerous awards from humane societies, academic institutions, and autism organizations, her books, including Animals in Translation, The Autistic Brain, and Calling All Minds, became bestsellers. More than accolades, however, Temple valued utility, the real-world change that her inventions and insights brought to animals, students, and society. Chapter 5. Autism Advocate. Breaking Stereotypes and Building Bridges. As her career in animal science flourished, Temple Grandin began to realize that her most profound contributions might not lie solely in livestock designs or factory floor blueprints, but in the power of her voice, her story, and her identity. She wasn't just a scientist or an inventor. She was one of the first people to publicly declare, "I am autistic and I am successful." Speaking the truth, I am different, not less. Throughout the late 1982nd and into the 1992nd, Temple became increasingly aware that her lived experience was rare, not because she had autism, but because she could articulate it. Most of the public still viewed autism as synonymous with intellectual disability or emotional withdrawal. Nonverbal autistic individuals were often assumed to be unaware or unfeeling. Temple shattered that image. Her first memoir, Emergence, labeled Autistic, 1986, co-authored with Margaret Scariano, was a groundbreaking publication. It marked the first time someone with autism wrote about what it felt like from the inside. The book opened with her early childhood struggles, her tantrums, and her mother's refusal to accept institutionalization, and then guided readers through Temple's academic, professional, and emotional awakening. More than facts, the book offered an emotional blueprint for families, educators, and clinicians. Temple didn't ask for pity. She demanded understanding. "I am different, not less," she wrote a sentence that would become one of the most quoted affirmations in the history of autism advocacy. Public speaking. The reluctant voice of autism. Despite her natural discomfort with public speaking, the lights, the crowds, the unpredictable questions, Temple began accepting invitations to speak. Her talks were pragmatic, scientific, often blunt, but full of insight and humor. She used visual slides, real-life examples, and direct comparisons between animal behavior and human neurology. She wasn't afraid to say controversial things like, "Some autistic kids need more structure," or "Gifted programs should include hands-on mechanical tasks." Temple didn't preach inclusion for inclusion's sake. She advocated for productivity, self-sufficiency, and mutual understanding. At autism conferences and education symposiums, she offered parents a new vision. Your child may not talk, but they may still think in images. They may not like crowds, but may thrive in laboratories, studios, or farms. They may not look people in the eye, but they may be honest, focused, and brilliant. Temple told the truth, even when it made people uncomfortable. She argued that some kids needed more discipline, others needed more patience, but all needed respect. Temple's advice to parents was radical, not in tone, but in specificity. Don't wait. Start early interventions. Waiting until a child is ready often leads to missed developmental windows. Stretch, don't coddle. Push autistic kids just beyond their comfort zone, not into distress, but into growth. Avoid labels. Call a child a kid who loves math, or a girl who draws amazing animals, not the autistic girl. Teach skills, not just academics, cooking, laundry, shopping, money handling, using public transit. These build confidence and independence. Get them a job, even if it's walking dogs, stacking shelves, or cleaning stalls. Real-world skills build real-world confidence. Temple knew what it was like to feel left out, to be underestimated, and to internalize the idea of being wrong. She wanted no child to carry that weight. She wanted them to carry tools instead. Temple Grandin became one of the strongest voices promoting vocational education in schools. While many education systems prioritized college-bound tracks focused on testing and theory, Temple pushed for programs in carpentry, mechanics, agriculture, computer programming, art and design, culinary skills. She argued that many autistic and neurodiverse students were visual thinkers, pattern-oriented, and hands-on learners, and traditional lecture-style teaching left them behind. She called for a revaluation of blue-collar work, not as a fallback, but as a first-choice career path for some. The world needs welders and engineers, she said, but it also needs people who fix plumbing, build homes, and grow food. Temple's push for STEM with structure, visual learning, and workplace readiness made her a major influence in curriculum reform. By the 2002, Temple's reach had gone global. She was invited to speak in Europe, Asia, South America, and Australia, not just about autism, but about neurodiversity, animal welfare, and engineering design. Universities used her textbooks in animal science programs. Autism organizations cited her work as foundational. Her quotes appeared in TED Talks, psychology papers, and parent handbooks. She was featured on 60 Minutes, Larry King Live, NPR, The New York Times, Scientific American. She even gave a TED Talk in 2010 that became one of the most watched of all time. The world needs all kinds of minds. The talk was a powerful summary of her belief in neurological diversity as an asset, not a pathology. She described how different thinkers' visual, verbal, pattern, and auditory could work together to solve complex global problems. In 2010, Temple's story reached an entirely new audience through the award-winning HBO biopic Temple Grandin, starring Claire Danes. The film depicted her early life, her battles with fear and misunderstanding, her invention of the squeeze machine, and her rise as an animal behavior expert. Danes' performance won an Emmy, and the film received critical acclaim for its visualization of Temple's mind using animation and cinematography to show how she thought in pictures. For many viewers, it was the first time they saw autism from the inside out, not just as a set of symptoms, but as a vivid, dynamic way of experiencing the world. Temple consulted heavily on the film, ensuring its accuracy. After its release, she said, "I didn't want people to see me as a puzzle or a tragedy. I wanted them to see the system I built." The film cemented her place as not just a scientist or an advocate, but as a cultural icon of resilience, intellect, and difference. Temple continued balancing her professional work with public outreach. She never abandoned her animal welfare projects, regularly auditing meat processing plants, updating designs, and mentoring young engineers. But she also became a full-time educator, teaching at Colorado State University, where she served as a professor of animal science. Her lectures combined science, ethics, humor, and directness. She challenged students to get out and see the real world, to visit slaughterhouses, interview ranchers, and sketch out their designs, not just simulate them on a screen. For autistic students, Temple became more than a professor. She was proof that they could belong in science, academia, and leadership roles. Temple never had children. She never married. She often said she didn't understand the rules of romantic relationships and wasn't interested in the drama or messiness they seemed to involve. But she nurtured a different kind of family, thousands of students, readers, farmers, and advocates who saw in her a beacon of possibility. Her legacy was not measured in traditional ways, not by family trees or corporate titles, but in the lives she changed. The autistic teen who stopped feeling broken, the farmer who redesigned his chute to reduce panic, the teacher who stopped punishing bad behavior and started asking what the child needed, the parent who said, "Now I understand my child's world." Temple Grandin's work as an autism advocate was never about fame or praise. It was about systems fixing what was broken, improving what was good, and building what didn't yet exist. Whether in animal pens or public schools, she approached every problem with the same mindset: observe, analyze, design, improve. She believed the best kind of advocacy was one that built bridges, not walls, and turned differences into tools. Chapter 6, Global Thought Leader, Changing How the World Thinks About Thinking. By the early 2010 second, Temple Grandin had become more than a public figure or a scientific expert. She had emerged as something far more enduring, a global thought leader, someone whose ideas shaped how societies viewed intelligence, behavior, and even the purpose of education and ethics. She stood at the intersection of psychology, engineering, ethics, and culture, not as a celebrity, but as a functional philosopher whose life experience was her most powerful experiment. A Mind for All Nations. While Temple's research originated in the American West among cattle ranchers and university classrooms, her influence quickly spread across borders. Her books were translated into dozens of languages. Her documentary segments were aired in Brazil, Japan, Sweden, South Korea, Australia, and India. She gave keynote speeches across Europe and Asia, tailoring each message not to cultural platitudes, but to universal principles. Her message remained global and consistent. We have to stop pathologizing difference and start engineering environments where those differences become strengths. In India, she spoke to educators about accommodating visual learners. In Norway, she advised on designing schools for sensory-friendly education. In Australia, she worked with cattlemen to reduce transport stress in livestock. In the UK, she addressed policymakers on neurodiversity in the workplace. Whether talking to scientists, farmers, or government officials, Temple had one rule: speak plainly and show how it works. Rethinking intelligence more than IQ. One of Temple's most important intellectual contributions is her challenge to the standard definition of intelligence. While society long favored IQ, standardized testing, and verbal fluency, Temple insisted that this left behind millions of minds. If Einstein had been born today, she once said, he might have ended up in a special ed classroom. She distinguished between object visualizers and pattern thinkers, a model she developed by studying her own cognition and those of others on the spectrum. Object visualizers think in photorealistic images. They are great at mechanics, architecture, and animal behavior. Pattern thinkers are good at math, abstract systems, and coding. Verbal thinkers excel at reading, writing, debating, and scripting. Her conclusion was radical. All types of thinking are essential, but education systems were geared almost exclusively to verbal and symbolic thinkers. Temple pushed for schools to rebuild curriculum around cognitive diversity, project-based learning, maker spaces, robotics teams, agriculture internships, visual spatial puzzles, modular assessments over standardized tests. She didn't just talk about theory. She helped schools design workshops, revise classroom layouts, and coach instructors on multi-pathway teaching strategies, corporate consulting, and the business of inclusion. Temple Grandin's influence also extended into corporate boardrooms. Major tech companies like Google, Microsoft, and SAP began to explore neurodiversity hiring programs. Temple advised them on inclusive recruiting practices, workplace modifications, and manager training to accommodate different cognitive styles. She advocated for quiet workspaces for hypersensitive employees, flexible schedules to minimize stress, alternative communication methods, email instead of phone, visual instruction manuals, logical workflows with minimal surprises. She often said, "You don't need to lower your standards, you just need to present them differently." Her most important advice to businesses: stop hiring people who look good in interviews but can't do the job. Start hiring people who can do the job even if they struggle in interviews. This philosophy created ripple effects in the tech, manufacturing, and design industries. It also opened the door for autistic coders, engineers, designers, and analysts to find meaningful employment, sometimes for the first time. Temple's bibliography continued to grow with a blend of memoir, advocacy, science, and practical guides. Her books included The Autistic Brain, Helping Different Kinds of Minds Succeed, 2013, Animals Make Us Human, 2009, Calling All Minds, How to Think and Create Like an Inventor, 2018, Visual Thinking, The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions, 2022. Each book was accessible, illustrated with personal stories, real-life examples, and Temple-tested advice. She didn't write for scholars. She wrote for parents, teachers, engineers, ranchers, and thinkers of all kinds. Her writing style was as practical as her personality, direct, unflinching, solutions-driven. She didn't sugarcoat, she instructed. Temple didn't just critique education, she redesigned it. She worked directly with dozens of schools across the United States and abroad to build sensory-friendly classrooms, introduce animal science and horticulture into special ed programs, launch autism-inclusive robotics clubs, train teachers in behavioral de-escalation and visual lesson design, promote peer mentoring programs that celebrated different learning styles. Her model emphasized early exposure to real-world experiences. She urged schools to take students on field trips to construction sites, farms, workshops, factories, and hospitals. She also advocated for grades based on growth, not just performance. In her words, judge them by where they started, not just where they end up. This philosophy helped countless students, especially neurodivergent ones, discover their paths and their worth. Temple's personal rules for a better world. Over time, Temple Grandin became known for a set of life principles maxims she repeated at schools, conferences, and boardrooms alike. Here are a few of her favorites. Find the thing you're good at and do it. Get kids out and doing real things. A bad job is better than no job. Work builds identity. Don't let your kid become a recluse in the basement. Get them out. Help them stretch gently. Fix the environment, not the soul. Different is not broken. These principles weren't slogans. They were hard-earned strategies for living. Though Temple wasn't initially part of the formal neurodiversity movement, her work became its cornerstone. The movement, which began in the 1992nd, sought to reframe conditions like autism, ADHD, and dyslexia, not as diseases, but as natural forms of human variance. Temple's public presence as a successful, independent, scientifically rigorous, autistic woman gave the movement both visibility and credibility. Young autistic people began to cite her as their role model. Parents stopped seeing autism only as a tragedy. Employers began seeing potential instead of liability. While some younger activists have at times criticized Temple's focus on structure and behavior modification, most still regard her as a pioneer who opened the door. Temple herself embraces the movement's goals while adding her practical twist. I support neurodiversity, but we still have to teach basic skills. The world has rules. Kids need to learn them, and then they can bend them. By the time she reached her 72nd, Temple Grandin was no longer the girl who built a squeeze machine to calm her anxiety. She was a professor, best-selling author, consultant, advocate, and public philosopher. She had met presidents, scientists, world leaders, and royalty. Yet she remained down to earth. She still preferred jeans to dresses, labs to parties, cows to politics, but above all, she remained consistent. She never stopped showing up. She never stopped answering emails. She never stopped drawing blueprints, sketching designs, giving talks, writing books, or mentoring students. Temple once said, "I don't want to be remembered for being autistic. I want to be remembered for the things I built." Chapter 7. Later Life and Legacy, A Mind That Keeps Building. By her 72nd, most people would consider retirement a time to slow down, to rest, to reflect. But for Temple Grandin, the idea of not building, not designing, not teaching was unthinkable. Her mind, as she always said, was a machine that never turns off. Even as she aged, her curiosity, tenacity, and energy didn't diminish. If anything, they intensified. This chapter explores Temple's remarkable later life, not as a winding down, but as a deepening impact and her unfolding legacy, both tangible and intangible. Temple Grandin's daily schedule was a testament to her lifelong affinity for structure. She woke up early, often before dawn. Breakfast was routine, scrambled eggs and toast. She checked her emails, read scientific journals, updated designs, responded to educators, reviewed animal audits, and prepared lectures. Her calendar included lecturing at Colorado State University, speaking engagements across the globe, reviewing new animal handling systems, collaborating with agriculture departments, visiting slaughterhouses for animal welfare assessments, writing and editing books and articles, responding to letters from parents, students, farmers, and fellow autistics. Temple viewed retirement as a myth. "What would I do with myself?" she said. "Sit in a room and stare at the walls? No, thank you." She continued to believe that doing was healing and movement was focus. For Temple, purpose was medicine. Temple continued writing into her 72nd and beyond. Her later works reflect more introspection, but always grounded in actionable advice. In Navigating Autism, 2021, co-authored with Dr. Deborah Moore. She offered guidance to parents and professionals on building real-world pathways for autistic children focused on skills, confidence, and meaningful contribution. In Visual Thinking, 2022, she expanded her theory that society was crippling its own potential by marginalizing nonverbal, spatial, and mechanical intelligence. She warned that removing shop classes and over-relying on testing was breeding a generation of brilliant kids who never got the tools to succeed. These books were not complaints. They were blueprints for reform, grounded in decades of hands-on problem-solving. Her prose remained clear, directive, and utterly unpretentious. She spoke as a builder, not a theorist. At Colorado State University, Temple remained a tenured professor of animal science. Her students, many of them unaware of her fame, came to know her first as a tough, insightful, and deeply committed instructor. Her classes emphasized field experience over textbooks, direct observation over assumptions, ethical design over cheap fixes. Temple taught students how to sketch out livestock systems, test gates for stress, and interpret animal behavior. She encouraged trips to farms, feedlots, and slaughterhouses, insisting, "You can't fix what you haven't seen." Her mentorship went beyond academics. She encouraged neurodiverse students, helped them advocate for themselves, and coached them on navigating interviews, internships, and workplace politics. To her students, Temple wasn't just a teacher. She was a prototype for possibility, living proof that brains wired differently could still shape the future. In her later years, Temple continued traveling not to tourist spots, but to rural towns, science expos, agricultural fairs, and education summits. Her work took her to Canada, South Africa, Japan, Chile, the Netherlands, and beyond. Wherever she went, she brought new livestock system designs, autism advocacy plans, teaching guides for visual learners, lectures on engineering ethics and humane treatment. Governments invited her to advise on education reform. Engineering firms asked for audits and ergonomic improvements. Autism centers sought her guidance on program structure. She never traveled light. Her suitcase was filled with notebooks, animal behavior reports, model schematics, and hand-drawn diagrams. One journalist remarked, "Temple Grandin travels like an engineer going to build civilization, not like a celebrity on tour." Though Temple never sought fame, the world increasingly recognized her achievements. Honors included induction into the National Women's Hall of Fame, 2017, Time 100 Most Influential People in the World, 2010, induction into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, numerous honorary doctorates, the Double Helix Medal, Temple Grandin School in Colorado, named in her honor, the subject of global documentaries and profiles. Each award ceremony brought spotlights, not her favorite, but Temple understood their value. They amplified her mission. She used every podium not to thank, but to teach. "Don't look at me and clap," she'd often say. "Look at the people I'm trying to help and get to work helping them too." Enduring contributions to neuroscience and psychology, Temple's brain became a case study in neuroscience. In one major 2010 study using MRI and brain mapping, researchers at the University of Utah found that her brain had stronger than normal connections in visual and spatial areas and less activity in regions associated with verbal communication. Her corpus callosum, the bridge between hemispheres, was also shaped unusually, suggesting enhanced visual integration. The findings supported her theory of thinking in pictures and bolstered the neurodiversity movement's claim that different does not mean deficient. Temple's very anatomy proved her point. Her neurology made her insights possible, not in spite of autism, but because of it. Legacy in agriculture and engineering. Beyond autism advocacy, Temple Grandin's legacy in agriculture and animal welfare remained unparalleled. Over half the livestock in North America continued to be processed through equipment she designed. Her principles of curved chutes, solid-sided alleys, and non-slip floors were now industry standard. Her audit checklist for slaughterhouse behavior, developed in the 1992nd, were still used by McDonald's, Cargill, Tyson Foods, and others to ensure humane treatment. In addition, her emphasis on low-stress animal handling, better lighting, noise reduction, and predictable movement patterns fundamentally changed livestock transport, handling, and processing. Temple's work wasn't just theory. It was steel, bolts, and concrete systems that spared suffering on a global scale. A human legacy, changing lives, not just systems. Perhaps Temple's greatest legacy is not mechanical, but emotional and social. Thousands of parents have told her through tears, "You gave me hope." Thousands of autistic children have said, "You made me believe I can succeed." She showed that autism isn't a sentence, it's a system of perception. That education isn't about standardization, it's about unlocking every kind of mind. That science isn't just about formulas, it's about designing better lives. Temple Grandin redefined what it meant to live well, think clearly, and build ethically. Never done building. In interviews, Temple often said she didn't fear death, but she feared wasting time. She believed in using every minute to learn, teach, and build. She wanted to be remembered not as a miracle, not as a savior, but as a worker. I saw a problem. I fixed it. I kept going. As she often said, "You don't have to be normal to make a difference. You just have to be useful." Chapter 8. Reflections, Wisdom, and the World She Helped Create. As Temple Grandin moved into her later years, the pace of her work barely slowed, but her reflections deepened. Her lectures, books, and interviews took on the tone of a seasoned engineer, a social reformer, and most notably, a wise elder. She had lived long enough to see the world shift, sometimes painfully slow, but unmistakably forward. This chapter reflects on Temple's wisdom, the lasting imprint of her ideas, and the world she helped redesign not just for animals, not just for autistics, but for every kind of mind. Temple often said she felt grateful to have been born when she was before video games, smartphones, and internet overload. "I was raised doing real things, fixing gates, feeding animals, designing equipment. That gave me direction." When asked if she would have succeeded in today's society, she often paused. It would have been harder. Too much screen time, too little real-world experience. Kids today don't get enough hands-on learning. She expressed concern that society was turning inward, becoming overly anxious, and dependent on virtual worlds. Temple's solution was characteristically clear. We've got to get back to building, doing, and interacting with animals, machines, people, and nature. Throughout her life, Temple championed the idea that no one brain is inherently superior to another. Her entire life was a rebuke of the idea that verbal fluency equates to intelligence. She divided thinkers into three main categories. Visual thinkers, like herself, who think in photorealistic images. Pattern thinkers, mathematical, abstract logic minds. Verbal thinkers, those who excel at language, stories, debate. Temple advocated for equal respect, training, and opportunity for all three. Her goal was not inclusion for inclusion's sake, it was to solve real-world problems better, faster, and more humanely. She believed that every brain type contributes to the ecosystem of invention. Like biodiversity in nature, cognitive diversity ensures adaptability, innovation, and survival. Temple Grandin's advice, collected over decades, can be distilled into simple, powerful insights. Some of her most frequently quoted lines include, "The world needs all kinds of minds. I am different, not less. Being autistic is part of who I am, but it doesn't define everything I do. Fix the environment, not the person. You can't get experience without doing things. A career is built on doing things that people need." She didn't just say these things, she lived them. By the 2022 Temple Grandin had helped reshape multiple global conversations. In agriculture, humane slaughter became industry best practice, not fringe philosophy. Livestock handling design became a professional discipline in universities. Animal welfare audits were standard in supply chains. Small farms in Africa, Asia, and Latin America adopted her low-cost innovations. In education, schools across the world adopted visual learning strategies. STEM and vocational programs gained new respect and funding. Thousands of autistic students received tailored support, inspired by her work. Books like The Way I See It became required reading in education programs. In business, corporate neurodiversity programs from SAP to JP Morgan Chase credited Temple's teachings. HR departments developed autism hiring strategies based on her consultations. Visual training manuals, sensory-friendly offices, and nonverbal interview options became mainstream accessibility tools. In popular culture, the HBO biopic Temple Grandin, 2010, remained one of the most accurate and empowering depictions of autism ever produced. Documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube videos carried her message to millions. Autistic YouTubers and TikTok creators cited her as a pioneer who opened the door. Temple didn't just change minds, she changed systems. Her legacy is built into the infrastructure of how animals are handled, how students are taught, how employees are hired, and how thinkers are valued. Temple's life lit the path for countless others. Young autistic students saw in her a template for hope. Girls interested in science and engineering found a role model who defied stereotypes. Parents struggling with their child's diagnosis found in her story a reason not to give up. Educators who once dismissed nonverbal or hyperactive students began to see genius in unusual forms. Farmers who never thought about welfare began building calmer, safer, more efficient systems. Her effect was cross-disciplinary and cross-cultural, uniting farmers, teachers, scientists, doctors, artists, engineers, and children under the shared idea that different minds are essential to progress. Even in her late 72nd, Temple Grandin continued working on updating animal handling systems for climate change challenges, developing new agriculture curriculum for middle and high schools, promoting trade school pathways for visual thinkers, designing multi-sensory classrooms for inclusive education, creating accessible internship pipelines for autistic students in tech and engineering. She remained an email responder, blueprint editor, and workshop organizer. Even when travel slowed, she attended conferences virtually, presenting in real time from her Colorado home. "You stop learning, you start dying," she said. "There's always something new to build." By now, Temple Grandin is more than a person. She is a symbol of what autistic people can achieve, what ethical science can look like, what happens when schools support every kind of learner, what humane engineering can do for the world, what one stubborn, driven, compassionate mind can build. She's not just famous, she's foundational. Temple Grandin's journey is not over. Even when she eventually steps back from public life, her work will outlast her. Her books, buildings, systems, and speeches are already part of the global fabric. She redefined what it means to learn, teach, think, build, live, succeed. Her life is a blueprint not to copy, but to inspire. The purpose of life is to make things better. You find a problem, you solve it. You build something, you help someone. That's how you leave the world better than you found it. Temple Grandin, Chapter 9. Bonus section. In-depth interviews, quotes, and timeline of major contributions. This chapter compiles exclusive insights from Temple Grandin's many interviews, a collection of her most powerful quotes, and a detailed timeline of her major achievements. These elements help capture the essence of her legacy in her own words, words that have inspired scientists, educators, students, animal advocates, and neurodivergent thinkers worldwide. Over the years, Temple Grandin has sat for hundreds of interviews. What makes her stand out is her directness, clarity, and unwavering focus on practical solutions. Here are highlights from some of her most revealing conversations. Interview with 60 Minutes, 2012. Q. What do you say to people who think autism is a disability that must be cured? Temple. Autism is a different way of thinking. If you got rid of all the autism genetics, you'd lose Einstein, you'd lose Tesla, you'd lose half the Silicon Valley. Fresh Air with Terry Gross, 2010. Q. What was it like to grow up before autism was widely understood? Temple. I was lucky. I had people who pushed me. My mother never gave up. My science teacher got me interested in building things. I had a mentor. You need mentors. You need someone to help stretch you just outside your comfort zone. Neuroscience Forum Panel, 2016. Q. What's your advice for neurotypical people trying to connect with autistic individuals? Temple. Don't overload us with language. Use pictures. Use clear steps. Respect our interests even if you don't understand them. Get us doing real stuff. We need to see the purpose. TEDx Talk. The world needs all kinds of minds, 2010. Temple's closing statement. We need visual thinkers, pattern thinkers, verbal thinkers. We need all kinds of minds working together. And we need to start nurturing these talents early in the classroom, in the workplace, in the community. That's how we fix things. NPR. Hidden Brain, 2021. Q. What's the most dangerous idea in education today? Temple. That everyone has to go to college. That everyone learns the same way. We're throwing away great electricians, mechanics, builders, artists, computer scientists because they don't fit the mold. These interviews reveal a consistent theme. Temple Grandin believes in potential over pathology, structure over chaos, and doing over theorizing. Top 2, Temple Grandin quotes. 1. Different, not less. 2. The world needs all kinds of minds. 3. I think in pictures. Words are like a second language to me. 4. There needs to be a lot more emphasis on what a child can do instead of what he cannot do. 5. I am who I am. I didn't want to be like other people. 6. Autism is part of who I am. It's not all of who I am. 7. My mind works like Google Images. 8. Without autism, there'd be no NASA. 9. People on the spectrum often have uneven skills. That's okay. Use what's strong. 10. We need hands-on learning. We need to bring back shop class. 11. Being different gives you the chance to be original. 12. My disability opened the door to my ability. 13. Fix the environment, not the person. 14. What would happen to the world without visual thinkers? Who'd build the bridges? 15. You've got to stretch kids, not break them, stretch them. 16. The worst thing you can do is nothing. 17. I didn't get my job because of social skills. I got it because I could solve a problem. 18. I want to be remembered for the work I did, not for what I didn't do. 19. Help kids build things, not just resumes. 20. You don't have to be normal to build a better world. This timeline outlines the most significant milestones in Temple Grandin's life and career. Year 1947. Born in Boston, Massachusetts. 1,952nd diagnosed with brain damage before autism diagnosis became common. 1,962nd builds squeeze machine, attends Hampshire Country School. 1,970 earns bachelor's degree in psychology from Franklin Pierce College. 1,974 earns master's in animal science from Arizona State University. 1986, begins designing livestock handling systems. 1986 publishes Emergence. Labeled autistic. 1989 earns Ph.D. in animal science from University of Illinois. 1992 becomes a leading consultant on humane livestock handling. 1995 develops first audit systems for slaughterhouse animal welfare. 2006 publishes Animals in Translation and Thinking in Pictures. 2010 HBO film Temple Grandin wins 7 Emmy Awards. 2010 named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. 2012 inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. 2017 inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. 2021 co-authors Navigating Autism. 2022 publishes Visual Thinking, a manifesto for nonverbal learning, Styles. 2024, 25, still teaching at Colorado State University, active speaker globally. From every quote, interview, and timeline entry, one message emerges. Temple Grandin never stopped building. She built systems to reduce suffering. She built curricula to include diverse learners. She built a bridge between agriculture and ethics. She built a case for seeing autism as ability, not tragedy. She built a blueprint for how different minds contribute to humanity's future. And most powerfully, she built a life of meaning, impact, and unapologetic individuality. Her influence, brick by brick. Chapter 10, Closing Reflections, What Temple Grandin Taught the World. As we arrive at the closing chapter of Temple Grandin's extraordinary journey, we're not just reflecting on a biography, we're witnessing a profound transformation in how human potential, animal welfare, and diverse minds are understood across the globe. Temple Grandin didn't just live a meaningful life. She reshaped what meaning itself could look like for people on the margins, for thinkers long misunderstood, and for industries that forgot animals were living beings. This chapter offers a holistic reflection on what Temple Grandin taught the world and why her impact will echo long after she's gone. 1. Autism is not a tragedy, it's a variation. Temple challenged the notion that autism is something to fix. Her life work shows it is something to understand, support, and empower. She disrupted clinical narratives and said, "I wouldn't want to be cured. I like the way I think. But I needed help early on. Structure, teachers, real experiences." Temple gave millions of autistic individuals and their families something no diagnosis could give: hope, pride, and purpose. She proved that a so-called disability could also be the very source of genius. 2. The world was built by different minds. Temple Grandin reinforced that society owes its greatest advances from the wheel to the web to diverse cognitive wiring. She urged us to stop glorifying one way of thinking and start leveraging all of them. Visual thinkers, engineers, artists, designers, pattern thinkers, mathematicians, musicians, coders, verbal thinkers, writers, leaders, advocates. She didn't just talk about diversity, she proved its necessity with every audit, every design, every lecture. 3. Animals deserve dignity. Before Temple Grandin, few in industrial agriculture thought deeply about stress, fear, or emotion in animals. She forced the world to acknowledge what farmers, pet owners, and veterinarians already suspected. Animals are sentient. They feel pain. They get scared. And that matters. Her humane handling systems, now used across 90% of slaughterhouses in the U.S., prove that ethics and efficiency are not opposites. Temple Grandin brought compassion to capitalism and didn't need laws to do it. She used design thinking and data to convince the hardest skeptics. 4. Education must change. Temple believed that schools are failing not because of students, but because of systems that don't respect brain diversity. She called for more hands-on learning, more vocational programs, less test-based conformity, more freedom for kids to explore passions, more mentorship, more real-world application. Her core belief was clear. You can't learn how to fix a motor, train a dog, or weld steel from a worksheet. She spoke truth to education and reminded us, not all geniuses write essays or ACE exams. 5. Build. Always build. Temple Grandin is a builder at heart. Her philosophy of action is simple. Don't just complain. Fix it, design it, build it, try it. This mindset influenced farmers who rebuilt their pens, parents who built visual schedules, teachers who built inclusive classrooms, employers who built neurodiverse pipelines, students who built confidence through welding, robotics, or animal care. Temple's story is not about overcoming autism. It's about using what you have to build what the world needs. 6. Influence without fame. Though she's famous now, Temple never chased stardom. Her rise came organically through results, not marketing. She didn't invent a gadget or write code. She didn't win a Nobel Prize or start a tech company. But she did something greater. Changed how food systems treat animals, changed how schools treat neurodiverse students, changed how parents treat their autistic children, changed how workplaces treat non-conforming minds. She became a legend not by being flashy, but by being effective. 7. A legacy still unfolding. Temple Grandin's influence is far from finished. In fact, she planted seeds that will bloom for generations. Her legacy lives on in every autism parent who chooses to nurture, not mourn, every child who finds strength in being different, every factory redesigned to be kinder and smarter, every school that rewards real skills over memorization, every person who finds their path outside the system. She taught us that a single voice, however weird or awkward, can recalibrate entire systems. If I could snap my fingers and be non-autistic, I would not. Autism is part of who I am. Temple Grandin. Her story is not just inspiring, it is redefining. She showed us that the brain is not broken, it's different, that compassion and design can go hand in hand, that doing things is more powerful than simply knowing things, that every child, no matter how difficult, deserves a future, that quiet revolutions can happen in farms, classrooms, and lecture halls. Temple Grandin is not a myth. She is a working, thinking, building mind, fully human, fully brilliant, fully herself. Temple Grandin gave the world a blueprint, not just for better animal care, not just for neurodiversity, but for better thinking, better doing, better living. That blueprint says, notice what others miss. Care about those who can't speak. Use your unique mind. Never stop building. Her legacy is not made of marble statues or gold medals. It is made of fewer animals in pain, more children with purpose, and a world where being different means you belong. The world doesn't need more normal. It needs more builders, thinkers, and doers. So get out there and build something. Temple Grandin.